A man spends his whole life chasing happiness. He thinks it hides in the next job, the next woman, the next drink, the next trip, the next success. He runs faster and faster, as if happiness were always just one step ahead of him, waiting to be caught. Yet no matter how much he tries, the moment he reaches out, it slips through his fingers like smoke. Most people will tell you this is simply the way life works, that you must keep striving, working harder, sacrificing more, until at last you earn the right to be happy. But what if that explanation is nothing but a lie, a comforting illusion that keeps you forever running in circles? What if the truth is that the very act of chasing happiness is the reason you never find it? When you stop to think about it, happiness seems like a cruel trick. It appears in flashes, when you buy something new, when someone praises you, when life goes your way, but then it fades, leaving you emptier than before. Men grow older with this constant hunger in their chest, ashamed that despite all their efforts, they still feel incomplete. Yet there is nothing wrong with you. The mistake is not in your heart, but in the way the world has taught you to look for happiness. You were told it was out there, far away, waiting for you. But Alan Watts revealed a truth that turns everything upside down, that happiness is not a prize at the end of the race, but the simple recognition that there is no race at all. This changes everything. Suddenly, what once felt like failure begins to look like the first glimpse of freedom. And if you let this idea sink into your bones, you will understand why peace has always escaped you, and how you can stop running today. Before we continue, let me invite you to subscribe, to share this reflection, and to leave a comment below. By doing so, you help spread these words to other men who are tired of the endless chase and who may need, just like you, to hear that there is another way to live. When a man begins to see through the illusion of the chase, something unsettling happens. He no longer feels driven by the same desires that once kept him moving. The car he wanted, the woman he longed for, the promotion he craved, suddenly they don't hold the same shine. It's not that he becomes indifferent or numb, it's that he starts to notice something deeper, that every time he reached a goal, the satisfaction lasted only moments before the next craving appeared. Like waves crashing against the shore, desire returned again and again, each time promising fulfillment, each time leaving him just as restless as before. Alan Watts compared this cycle to playing a piece of music. Imagine a symphony where the only goal is to get to the final note. If that were the case, the best orchestras would play faster and faster just to reach the end. But we don't listen to music that way. We enjoy it because of how it unfolds, moment by moment, without rushing to conclude. Yet this is not how most of us live. We treat life like a race, not a dance. And so happiness keeps eluding us. Not because it's hiding, but because we're too busy trying to arrive somewhere to notice that we've already arrived. You were taught that happiness is a reward for effort, that if you discipline yourself, climb high enough, become worthy enough, one day you'll deserve it. But Watts warned us, this belief turns life into a performance. Every smile becomes strategic, every laugh rehearsed, every achievement another brick in the prison of expectations. Instead of living, you're constantly proving. Instead of breathing, you're holding your breath. And what's worse, you start to feel ashamed for not being happy, as if your struggle is a personal failure, rather than the inevitable result of a false system. This is why the man who pauses, who stops the chase, not out of defeat, but out of clarity, begins to feel something new. At first, it's confusion, even fear. Who is he, if he is not pursuing anything? But soon, if he's patient, that silence becomes peace. The noise fades. The tension in his chest loosens. He notices the breeze again, the taste of coffee, the stillness of early morning. Small things, invisible to the one who is rushing. And here, for the first time, happiness appears. Not loud and triumphant, but quiet, like a forgotten friend who was waiting all along. It's in this quiet, when the dust settles and the world no longer shouts through your thoughts, that a man begins to realize something radical. He was never lacking anything. Not really. The hunger he carried wasn't for a thing or a status, or even for love. It was for presence. But because he had been trained to look outward, he mistook that inner emptiness for an external absence. And so he tried to fill it with women, with money, with validation, with noise. Each attempt only deepened the void, like drinking salt water to quench thirst. What Alan Watts taught wasn't to reject the world, but to see through the illusion that happiness depends on what happens outside of you. And here comes the strange part. Once a man stops demanding that life makes him happy, life begins to feel lighter. Because the pressure lifts, the expectations dissolve, the need to constantly fix, achieve, or prove fades into the background. You start to notice things again. The way the light hits the window in the afternoon, the rhythm of your own breath, the kindness of strangers, and not in a forced spiritual way, not as a technique, just because you're finally paying attention. You're not trying to extract happiness. You're allowing life to be what it is. Others may not understand this shift. They might say you've lost your edge, that you've given up. You'll notice how uncomfortable people get when you no longer participate in the game. You no longer brag, no longer compete, no longer chase. They see you as distant, maybe even broken. But deep down, you know the truth. What they call losing the spark is simply your fire no longer being for show. What they call giving up is your refusal to keep pretending. What they call weakness is the strength of a man who no longer needs to perform. The tension now lives between two worlds. The world that taught you to chase, and the world you're starting to feel under your feet, steady and calm. In the old world, you were always on the verge of something, almost happy, almost whole. In the new one, there's no almost, there's only now. No arrival, no prize, just the unshakable stillness of someone who doesn't need anything to feel real. And in this stillness, something wild happens. Joy begins to emerge on its own. Not loud, not ecstatic, but simple, rooted, and real. When a man begins to embody this stillness, it doesn't mean his life becomes perfect. Bills still come. People still leave. Some days still feel heavy. But the difference is, he no longer believes these moments define his worth. In the old way of living, pain was a threat to his identity. If things didn't go well, it meant he wasn't doing well. If someone rejected him, it meant he wasn't good enough. But now, he understands. Pain is not personal. It's part of the current. He doesn't cling to it or fight it. He lets it pass. Just like the wind. Just like a cloud. Alan Watts often spoke of the illusion of control. The idea that we are the masters of our fate. That if we just think hard enough, plan well enough, grind long enough, we can secure our happiness. But the more we tighten our grip, the more life slips through our fingers. The man who learns to trust the flow, not in a passive way, but in a wise one, begins to act differently. He stops asking, "How can I win?" and starts wondering, "What is this moment asking of me?" That single question dissolves the ego's obsession and brings him back to the ground beneath his feet. The world around him doesn't understand this shift. Friends might drift away. Partners might complain that he's too calm, too quiet, too hard to read. We're briobish, but they are reacting to a mirror that no longer flatters their expectations. When you stop playing the game, you stop reflecting other people's illusions. And they don't like that. So they test you. They try to pull you back into the drama, the chase, the noise. But you don't flinch. Not because you're stubborn, but because you've tasted something more honest. You begin to realize that happiness was never supposed to be a high. It was never supposed to be loud or explosive. It's not the applause or the celebration. Real happiness, the kind that doesn't depend on anything, is silent. It's the peace of knowing you don't need to be someone else. It's the stillness that comes when you stop editing your soul to be accepted. And in this state, you don't lose your drive. You just stop being driven by fear. You act not to prove, but to express. You move not to escape, but to explore. And slowly, quietly, your life begins to change. Something subtle begins to unfold as the man settles deeper into this new way of being. His face changes, not in appearance, but in expression. The constant flicker of anxiety behind his eyes fades. His smile, when it appears, is no longer a mask. It comes from somewhere real. He walks differently, not as someone trying to impress, but as someone who no longer needs to prove anything. People sense this shift, though they may not understand it. Some feel drawn to him, curious about the quiet strength he now carries. Others feel threatened, unsettled by the fact that he no longer responds to the usual games. He doesn't react the way he used to. He doesn't chase. He doesn't beg. He doesn't need. And this is where a new kind of power begins to take root. Not the kind that dominates or controls, but the kind that refuses to be controlled. You see, when you no longer depend on external things to give your life meaning, you become free. Not free from life, but free within it. You can enjoy success without being enslaved by it. You can love without attachment. You can fail without collapsing. Alan Watts spoke often of this, that true happiness isn't found by reaching for something, but by falling into what is. And when you fall into the moment fully without resistance, even pain has a softness to it. Now, the man doesn't stop working. He doesn't abandon ambition or passion, but his energy is different. He's not driven by lack, but by curiosity. He doesn't need the world to make him whole. He enters the world already whole and brings something to it. That is the inversion. That is the secret. While others continue to grasp at life with trembling hands, he opens his palm. And life flows to him, not because he demanded it, but because he no longer blocks it with his fear. There is a cost to this clarity. You lose the comfort of the herd. You lose the rush of the chase. You may even lose people who only loved the version of you that was hungry, lost, and easy to manipulate. But what you gain is unshakable. Peace that doesn't depend on circumstance, presence that doesn't need attention, and a strange, tender joy that bubbles up for no reason at all. The kind of joy you don't post about, the kind of joy that simply is. And so the man walks through the world unchanged on the outside, yet transformed at the core. He still works. He still speaks. He still moves through the same streets. But something in him has settled. The itch to escape, to become, to arrive. It's gone. He realizes now that happiness cannot be possessed, only touched in passing, like light on water. And the more he tries to hold it, the more it vanishes. So he stops holding and lets it come and go like breath. At first, this seems like loss, but slowly it reveals itself as freedom. He's no longer addicted to highs or terrified of lows. He lets people come and go. He lets days be what they are. He doesn't run from silence. In fact, he begins to treasure it, because silence no longer means absence. It means presence, finally felt. People don't always know what to make of him. Some call him distant, others call him wise. But labels don't matter anymore. He doesn't need to be understood. He only needs to be real. And real men, as it turns out, are quiet. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they're no longer trying to be heard. In the end, what once looked like failure becomes peace. What once felt like loneliness becomes freedom. And what once seemed like weakness, the refusal to play the world's game, becomes the quiet strength of a man who finally remembers who he is. Alan Watts didn't tell us to escape life, to retreat into some abstract bliss. He invited us to drop the illusion of control, to stop chasing what was never meant to be caught, and instead, to awaken. This awakening doesn't come with fanfare. It doesn't look impressive from the outside. You won't win trophies for it. In fact, from the outside, it might look like you've lost everything, but inside, you've won the only thing that matters: yourself. You are no longer fragmented, no longer begging, no longer running. And in that stillness, life finally begins to meet you, not as something to conquer, but as something to dance with. So if you've felt tired, not just in your body, but in your soul, if you felt the weight of always becoming and never arriving, know this: the door has always been open. You don't have to keep running. You don't have to keep pretending. You can stop now. You can breathe. You are already enough. If this reflection spoke to you, I invite you to subscribe, not just for more content, but to walk this path with us. Share this with someone you care about, someone who's been chasing too long. And leave a comment below. Tell us what you've let go of, Tell us what you found in the silence. Because every word you write reminds another man. You are not alone.